But also too now, whenever you start a relationship with a woman officer, people are going to know. Unless like you are that guy. Listen now, I mentioned the first part one. If you haven't seen part one, go ahead and watch part one too after this video, man. Prison Romance Part 1. So listen now, you got that character, that type of guy in prison, that inmate who he got bodies. You know what I mean? Like not like murder bodies, but like sexual body. He done got plenty relationships with staff. So he's experienced, he knows what he's doing. He's the finesser, he's the player. He's coming in there to get a route, to get the avenue, to get drugs in, phones, and that's his whole intention with building this relationship. So this guy, he may be able to keep other people out his game room. He may be that smooth to where like, he can have people not notice. But for the most part, bro, people are gonna notice that you're in a relationship with a woman officer. Why? Because inmates in prison, survival instinct, you watch everything. You have to. You are literally watching your entire surroundings at all times. Always see everything. And some people are just like flat out nosy. Some people, they're on that type of time to where they're trying to have a relationship with a woman. So they're watching her just as much as you're watching her. So they're watching her every move. So while they're watching her eyes always go to you. They're watching every time you talk to her, they see that. Every time that you're at the flap, you know what I mean? Where the booth is, where they stay, secluded away from the inmates in the dorm and see you up there talking to her, they see that. So everyone begins to see, okay, you're talking to her a lot. She's coming to you a lot. She starts talking to you, or they may see you throw away like a styrofoam tray. They don't hand those out in canteen. That's street food. Or they may see you walk away from the flap with chewing on gum. You know what I mean? One wrong move like that, dang, she gave him gum. She feeling you. You know what I mean? So it's a bad thing when the rest of the inmate population knows you're in a relationship. Why? Because you got haters out there, man. You got snitches, they gonna tell on you, man. They're gonna tell on you. So the majority of the time, and I would say 90% of the time, I would say 95% of the time, if not 99, the romantic relationships in prison for the most part don't last. I wouldn't say they don't last in length because I know some stories of some guys I know personally who have married nurses as well as sergeants, female officers when they came home from prison. And they done got caught and he done got locked up and he's released and she quit her job and they're married to this day. I know plenty. I know plenty stories like that. Happens all the time. But what I'm getting at is 95, 99% of these romantic relationships in prison, like they get found out. People catch them. And it's because you got so many people, our eyes are watching everything. And so the reality that I'm getting at, man, is even though it's a dope experience and it's the highlight of the moment for that incarcerated man, like chances are he's eventually it's gonna fall apart. You guys may break up for whatever personal reasons. She may move on. She's messing with somebody else. Or a lot of times, man, people see and they snitch, they drop kites, and that happens all the time. But also too, not only does it end a lot because people see, people tell either other administration or the inmate population, but also too, man, it can lead to other bad things, and that's you losing your sanity. The inmate losing his mind because he's so in love. I remember whenever I was in prison my first time. That's something I'm gonna be personal now. All throughout my incarceration, I went to prison 3 times. I've done over 12 years in prison. Every time I've been to prison, every prison I've been at for the most part. And once again, too, just to give you a rundown of like my life while incarcerated, Jesus completely transformed my life in prison. So I wasn't in prison trying to like, pull women and run down on women and have sex with them. But of course, I'm a man, I'm attracted to women, and that's one of my biggest areas of my life that I've always wrestled with. And especially as a believer and follower of Jesus, I wrestle with like, sexual sin and, just desiring to be in relationships with women. So even while I was in prison during these 3 prison bids, pretty much every prison I went to, I was always challenged with the temptation of being in a relationship with a woman who worked in prison. For myself, it was a couple different officers who worked at different prisons I was at, as well as women who worked in food service. So for me, I can say personally, as I'm talking about, it can mess with your mind. I remember when I was 18, my first prison bid, there was a woman. She was probably, I was 18. She was like 24, maybe she was 26. And I'm green. I don't know nothing about like prison romance, but she's one of them chain gang divas, and she was pretty too. You know what I mean? She was bad. She wasn't like fine, fine like Beyonce fine, but she was beautiful, man. And of course, I'm 18 years old in prison, and I've been in prison maybe no, I was probably like 19 then. I've been in prison maybe about a year. So anyways, long story short, I didn't know she was like a chain gang diva because I wasn't that like up to game when it comes to like how women move in prison and like just the different types of women who are in relationships. But she was definitely one of them girls to where like she was just trying to get attention. She was an attention whore. So, but she would like only like she would bounce from inmate to inmate. So she was locked in with me for a while. But I remember like I was like all up in my head. I was like just locked in on this girl. You know what I mean? I was like obsessing over her. And the whole point I get to that is that, with me, it was like balance, even though it was like unhealthy in my mind. And maybe I was acting a little crazy, like emotionally. Like I ain't go off the deep end and spaz out and do nothing crazy. But for some guys, man, like, yo, that love, that prison romantic relationship can lead to a lot of bad things. Like that talked about in part one, that guy stabbing that female officer in the neck because she broke up with him. Or like I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, part two, that my dog stabbed another inmate because he told on him. And it's like, and he was like, a high ranking member in a specific gang. So he's on that type of time anyway when it comes to somebody snitching on him. But I know for the most part, like from what he shared with me, he didn't just wet up that guy because he snitched on him. He wet up that guy because he loved that girl. And because he just like ruined their relationship, because she got moved to another compound. So like this guy who told on him pretty much had them like their relationship in. And my dog just seeing blood, he just blacked out. So that's what I'm getting at, is that even though like these prison romantic relationships may be a good thing for a while for like the inmate, like a lot of times for the most part it always turns out bad. And especially if the guy can like, lose his mind, over this girl, lose his sanity, and it can get ugly. Like I've already mentioned some stories. Um but also too, it can get ugly another way. Man, I done seen some things, I done heard some stories, and I personally know people who, like I mentioned, this can normally fall in the lap the guy who's the finesser. The guy who's like, that's his intention, that's his approach with women while he's incarcerated. He's the player, he's the one pulling a lot of girls. Normally this problem happens to him. Normally this guy, he was a dope boy on the street. He was somebody on the street. So he normally got girls coming to see him weekly, whether it's different girls or the same girl, his baby mama or his main chick, whatever. So he's normally in Vizzo a lot. And a lot of times you hear stories, and I know people who his girls come on to see him, and he's seeing them every weekend. But the woman that he's in a relationship with who works at the prison, normally like an officer is assigned to a specific dorm. And that's what makes it easy or easier to be in a relationship with a girl, because if you live in this dorm and she works your dorm, she's assigned to your dorm. And that's why administration, they specifically have it to where like officers can only work at certain posts for a certain amount of time, because they try to prevent the consistent interaction. So whenever you have a woman that's assigned to this dorm and you live there, man, they pulling up on her every day. You know what I mean? They have an in-depth conversation. It gives their time for her to fall in love with him and for him to like build a relationship with her, for him to fall in love with her as well. But sometimes they can move them around just like for the day if they're short, if they need somebody to cover over here. So there's a lot of times, a lot of stories to where this girl who's in this relationship with this guy, this player, right? She normally works his dorm, and she normally don't work visitation. Normally she don't even work on the weekends, but she's getting overtime, or maybe she heard about his baby mama and she trying to see things. So maybe she specifically asked for that post for the weekend, whatever the case may be. But guess who's in visitation that Saturday? Watching her man, who she's in a relationship with, kiss another woman who's his baby mama. So she's in there, the officer sizing up his baby mama, looking crazy. You know how women can get. Women, if you're watching this, you already know they sizing it. This officer looking at this girl's side eye. So this girl's looking at like her man, like, who is this girl looking at me crazy? So now the baby mama or the girlfriend, whoever it is on the street, now she's putting two and two together. He's messing with her. Or sometimes they get to the point where the officer will straight up say something to the girl. and put him on blast and be like, oh, you his girl, or she may not know that he has a girlfriend or whatever, and she can ruin his long-term relationship, and now she ain't coming to see him, and now she don't want to talk to him. So that's other drama that can result from prison romance. And also too, man, I'm gonna talk about this